At our last meeting, we were discussing the scope of intellect, and I had read one poem of Rumi's to you, and tonight it is the last session of this year, 2016, and with this poem I'm trying to tie together the elements that have come up throughout the year. And a lot of my discourse has been about, in fact, about the topic of disunity, or separation as it's called. And it is a very important topic in Sufism, and it's important enough for Rumi that he starts his great book, the Masnavi, on this topic of separation. And throughout the year, if you go back and you look at the different talks that were given, what I was trying to do is treat the separation for what it really is, which is a kind of mistake in perception and a mistake in understanding. So if you want to be practicing Tawheed, experiential unification, the first thing is to understand how serious the obstacle is. Now, who is it that would say, on what can I base the statement that it is an error in perception? Well, there would be the Quran, for example, where we have many examples where God is explaining how different aspects of the human self have kept them far away from God and have prevented them from knowing the essential reality, which is that God is their very spirit, that He says He blew into everyone. We could see it in the Hadith literature. We find out that unification happens through a process that requires the nafs to soften and to become receptive and to become open to God's grace and God's love. And God goes so far as to say, for those people that He loves them, they love Him. Because at this time, early in Sufism, there were many developments that we also talked about during the year that led to a rigidity and a focus on literalism in Islam. And one of the developments was as a reaction to the Mutazali intellectualism, the Ash'ari, the next great movement in the Islamic world, it proposed that God's qualities and the human being qualities are of a different order, that they are not comparable. But the Sufis did not accept this, actually. For example, if it is true, let me ask you, that the human qualities have no relationship to God's qualities, why did God say, yuhibbuhum wa yuhibbunahu? Why did He say, and I will love them and they will love me? In that statement, how could God be saying that their quality is completely different than my quality? Except, you see what I'm saying? Even in Quran, you will see for yourself that these were all parts of the progress, frankly, leading to the school of love emerging in Sufism. And the veil of separation is always described as a veil either of egotism or of a lack of information. And so you have these domains where the problem of all of Islam tends to be the unwillingness to accommodate the different levels of existence that they describe, the Quran describes from the outset, these very obscure and beyond the bounds of human understanding, this level of God. Ghani al-Alamin. Ghani al-Alamin means free from the need of the worlds. This is called Hahut in the system that came to structure these levels, called the presences. So the first presence is this level of divinity, and as you know, there's a level of Jabarut, a level of Malakut, and a level of Nasut. So there are these domains. In terms of the Quran it has its source in a very very abstract, beautiful, and pure domain called the al-Kitab. The al-Kitab means the mother of the book, and if we say, well, what has this been identified with? It's been identified with this level we've been studying called the Aql. This is what we found out in the last session. We found out that intellect is in the understanding of the spiritual people, East and West. Originally, it's not only a faculty, because we tend to think of it as the faculty of the intellect, thinking, cogitation, rationality, but in this world of the world of the Sufis, it is associated with a domain, a whole level of existence that has, in the Greek world of thought, would be like the Platonic ideas. But staying within our own tradition, we have these levels descending down to the level of the human being. And unfortunately, as I started this year with conversation about how did Islam become so rigid? And it's very simple. It became rigid by not acknowledging these other domains that were recognized in early Islam, recognized in the Quran, recognized in Hadith, recognized by great scholars. That, like 2 sessions ago, I was talking about Al-Ghazali's attempt to make the same position, that there are these different levels of existence, and therefore the Quran itself has to be interpreted according to different levels. And it is not limited necessarily to one level. Because everything, it may have, like I was saying to you this morning, a surat and mana. Surat means the form or the image. So when tonight's conversation, we will start with this idea, a poem of Rumi's that I think is very beautiful, and it clarifies a great many things. To remind you, last time we were looking at the Universal Intellect, or the first intellect as it's sometimes called, and this was equated with the al-Kitab, was it not? What else was it equated with? Yeah, the Nur, sometimes also included, they'll say Nur-i Muhammadi, same thing. So the first thing God created is Nur, or the first thing He created is the the mother of the book, and then from there we come down into a descent of these different levels. And tonight we're looking at Rumi's language when it concerns this terminology that in Persian Arabic is surat and ma'na. So it means the image or the form and its spiritual reality. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to read the poem first in English, and then in Persian, and then back to English again. And I've translated this before, but I thought a little bit more about, in the context of what we are doing, I've made a new translation. It's accurate, but it is not entirely literal, because you have to think about the meaning of these words. So we will start. The whole universe is the image of the Universal Intellect, called the Sublime Father by the tribe of the sacred word. Whoever is full of denial of the Universal Intellect will also view the Universal's image as a lowly dog. Make peace with the Father, abandon opposition, to see a golden carpet exposed in this water and clay. The resurrection will then be your very experience, the skies and the earth transformed before you. I, who remain at peace with the Sublime Father, have in my view this world as a paradise. Each moment has a new form, a new beauty, as weariness dissipates in seeing freshness. I perceive a world full of heavenly grace, a constant gushing of spring waters. Their waters' murmur invades my ears, my mind and awareness become ecstatic. Branches dance like passionate lovers. Hand-clapping leaves invoke minstrels. Flashes shine through a mirror's pouch. What brilliance when the mirror's out! Of thousands of secrets, I will tell none, since every ear is stuffed with doubt. Imagination takes these words as good tidings. What tidings, says intellect? This is my state. This is the poem, right? And again, the very large portion of this year's discourses and explorations had to do with the unification of these levels through seeing, meaning because of spiritual seeing, the opening of the eye of the heart, one would have a shift in perception that would see the unification as a lack of conflict between the levels, or a need of each level for each other. And if we wanted to explore that idea, all we have to do is look at the hadith that I quoted to you this morning. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is speaking to God, and he says, 3 things you have made beloved to me in this world. And he starts out and he says, the women, meaning the intimacy at this domain, at this level of this world, perfume, and you have made the prayer the solace of my eyes, or the joy of my eyes, you see. So that statement is a joining of these levels. Ubiba illaya min dunyakum talafan an-nasa'u wattibu wa ju'ilat qurratu ayni fi salwat. It's a very famous hadith. And much of the discourse about vision, it ranged in exploration from the astrolabe, if you look back, to cultivation of the faculty of God seeing, as in the hadith, and I become his or her seeing, and so forth. So if you think back through this year, I'm interested primarily in Sufism and spirituality, but I can't help but notice that the rigidity and many of the problems in Islam today, they have to do with the inability to connect the domains that Muhammad, peace be upon him, describes in this hadith. And so you get a very narrow and rigid interpretation that is just not necessary. And so in this poem, what I like about it is he's talking about the ideas that he brings up, includes from the very outset the idea that people would rebel or oppose the idea of this domain, of another spiritual domain. Well, in fact, that's the very criticism of what we would call today the reductionists. You see, actually today we would say, well, the materialist, the reductionist, is exactly somebody who would at least question or criticize the idea that there's a spiritual world. Why do you need to stretch that far? Why don't you just accept what's directly in front of you? And as I was saying, well, that's a reasonable thing to do. We can't really blame the scientific viewpoint for looking at things this way. And on the other hand, maybe in the case of the Sufis, we would say science should include the investigation within, using the awareness itself of what is going on inside and of that domain, meaning to not make that impossible in the field of epistemology, to allow that you could actually be the instrument yourself. And so what interests me about the poem is he starts out also with another thing interests me. First time we hear about Father, he was a universal intellect, wasn't it? But he starts out and he says the whole universe is the image of the universal intellect, and he tells us called the Sublime Father by the tribe of the sacred word. The tribe of the sacred word, it can mean several things. Generally speaking, in the Islamic world, it means the religious people who are listening to the Quran. But the tribe of the sacred word are also, it can be the people who have become reawakened to, they said, indeed, we witness this is so. See? So this is going from Alas, the world of archetypes, the world, the first dimension of the self, of the soul, where we find out that before the existence of this world, or you could say at the same time that this world exists, there's a world outside of time called Alas, am I not your Lord? And that world is a world that some people associate this tribe of the sacred word with that group of people who have become illuminated. They have again grasped the access. They have grasped the spiritual vision, the spiritual experience of that world. Our teacher, Ustad Zadeh Sahib, he claims to have access. Doesn't he talk about Alas? And he has poems about returning to Alas and drinking the wine of Alas. Drinking the wine, meaning the ecstasy of experiencing the world outside of time, stretches the normal boundaries of perception and feeling, and is compared, therefore, to ecstasy and drunkenness. You see, because there's an expansion of feeling. The other very interesting thing is right at the beginning of this poem, he says, whoever is full of denial of the universal intellect, meaning of these domains, will also view the image of it in this world as a dog. In other words, if they cannot accept the, here he's not talking about what we would regard as the reductionist, but he's now talking about the standard religious materialist, we could say, who actually has a spiritual materialism, as Trungpa would say, and their object is to go to heaven. And so they have this idea, you follow the rules, you fear God, and as a reward, you go to paradise. They have no love for this world. And the reason Rumi says they have no love for this world is they don't understand that this world is a reflection of the higher world. And he's saying if you could just reconnect your perception, your understanding, that you could witness the relationship of the higher world and the world of image and form, you would not hate this world. You would want to preserve this world. You would want to protect this world. This is another obviously useful idea for today, because you have people who are just delighted, not just in Islam, but they like end-of-the-world scenarios where they will be the beneficiaries. In their mythology, they're the beneficiaries because they will go live in paradise. Let's blow it all up, because we will. It's unreal. We will go off to our fruits on the couch or whatever it is that we're supposed to get in the afterlife. So Rumi Wright is very aware of this, and he's focusing on this. The idea of the father is very interesting because, as I said earlier, the universal intellect is very much associated with the mother. The al-Kitab is the mother of the book. Sometimes this is described as the Rahman, the mercy. The first thing that God creates is the mercy. We will see that statement. You see that in Sheikh Ibn al-Arabi's al-Hikam, we can, if you read his view of the mercy, is essentially its equivalent of this first level, meaning the mercy already is part of God, but in the level of manifestation, the first thing that shows itself as one of the divine names is as among the divine names, is the mercy. But here it's the Father. The Father historically would be associated with intellect and spirit, and the Mother would be associated with the earth and fertility and growth, you see. But they're always obviously a pair. They're always metaphysically, so it's not a surprise that this is here. Now the poem, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read the Persian, because then we'll come back to the English, but there'll be certain words, I mentioned already to you, we talked last time that in Arabic and Persian, therefore, aql kul is the universal intellect. We had this idea of surat, this would be image or form, and in Sufism, certainly in all the literature of Sufism, this has a direct relationship through these levels to ma'ana, or the spiritual reality. And those of you who, if you listen to the English of the translation, you can see what Rumi is saying is that he's using this world to see the other world. We'll come back to the English again, but just remember in the poem, and those of you in Persian, just take notice of this. He's saying, it's amazing. It's amazing because I can see the spiritual world through the world of image. I can see, through this, I can see the spiritual world. That's why I don't hate this. I love this because I can see the spiritual world. And the fanatic says, don't get attached to this because it's dirty. You know, it's distracting you, see. It's not good for you. See? So he's saying this. So we're just, some of the words will be words in Arabic that you know, but just take a moment for me to read the Persian, So he says, Kulle alam surate akle kulast. Kust ba baye har anke al kulast. Chun kasi ba عقل کل کفران فزود صورت کل پیش او هم سگ نمود صلح کن با این پدر خاکی بهل تا که فرش زر نماید آب و گل. پس قیامت نقد حال تو بود، پیش تو چرخ و زمین مبدل شود. من که صلحم دائما با این پدر، این جهان چون جنت استم در نظر. هر زمان نو صورتی و نو جمال، تاز نو دیدن فرو میرد ملال. من همی بینم جهان را پر نعیم، آبها از چشمه ها جوشان مقیم. بانگ آبش میرسد در گوش من، مست میگردد زمین و کوش من. شاخه ها رقصان شده چون تابیان، برگها کف زن مثل مطربان. برگ آیین است لامه از نمد، گر نماید آینه تا چون بود. از هزاران می نگویم من یکی، زان که آگنده است هر گوش از شکی. پیش وهم این گفت مژده دادن است، عقل گوید مژده چه نقد من است. Okay, so this is the poem in Persian. Again, I'm going to read the poem in English and then we'll do the prayer and then we'll come back on the conversation. The whole universe is the image of the Universal Intellect, called the Sublime Father by the tribe of the Sacred Word. Whoever is full of denial, of the Universal Intellect will also view the Universal's image as a lowly dog. Make peace with the Father, abandon opposition, to see a golden carpet exposed in this water and clay. The resurrection will then be your very experience, the skies and the earth transformed before you. I who remain at peace with the Sublime Father have in my view this world as paradise. Each moment has a new form, a new beauty, as weariness dissipates in seeing freshness. I perceive a world full of heavenly grace, a constant gushing of spring waters. Their waters murmur, invades my ears, my mind and awareness become ecstatic. Branches dance like passionate lovers, hand-clapping leaves invoke minstrels. Flashes shine through a mirror's pouch. What brilliance when the mirror is out. Of thousands of secrets I will tell none, since every ear is stuffed with doubt. Imagination takes these words as good tidings. What tidings, says intellect? This is my state. So it's very lovely. It's one of the three main poems in Book 4 about the intellect. We did one last time, and this is the second of those three main poems. And but this one, in some ways, is the most interesting, because again, what I find curious is since the beginning of the history of Islam, it is the intellect that has gotten Islam in trouble, and it is also another use of the intellect that has gotten Islam out of trouble. And so this is what we're exploring. You see, exploring Rumi is far more often criticizing and finding fault with the use of the intellect. Am I right? I mean, way more. Like we're talking 90%. He's critiquing what is called a partial intellect, the intellect that has been hijacked, shall we say, by the nafs, by religion, by philosophies, and so forth. And this other intellect is our origin. It's the idea coming out of Neoplatonic thought about nous. So remember, in that worldview, again, the origin is called the One, and the first emanation of the One is called intellect. It's called nous. And the interesting doctrine they held is that the human reality was also nous. It's also this intellect. So you could say, in some ways, we could compare it, therefore, to certainly to the spirit, or to the most fundamental, essential wisdom in a person that allows them to recognize the source of things. From there, we have psyche, which is nafs, also fitting easily into the Islamic context, from ruh to nafs, or from this aql kul to nafs kul. We are looking at a passage from the Masnavi of Rumi's beautiful book, and I'm reading to you book 4 from verse beginning at 3259, and the lines that follow that, for those of you who decide to go look it up. Our conversation is again a continuation of last time. We were looking at the scope of the intellect, and we were talking last time about how the intellect, when we think about it in the West, we think of it as a faculty. We think of it as a way that we use the mind, or we think of it as the essence of the mind, whatever. But in the classical world, the intellect is also a vast domain of ideas. It's a domain of potentials. This conversation started earlier this evening, and I was talking about Rumi's fundamental concern, for example, is separation, meaning the split in human existence that is a hallucination, really. It is caused by the action of coming into the world of the senses, according to classical thinking and Islamic thought. And Rumi is trying to show here that a return to unity can, in fact, can occur, and initially will take place for Rumi through an abstraction, or tajrid, a removal from the world, and this is the prelude to a complete unification, which is summed up in the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his statement to God of, "You have made 3 things beloved to me in this world: the intimacy of the women, the fragrance of perfume, and you have made the solace and joy of my eyes in the prayer." So we see what we would call the comprehensiveness or the unification. So you have this issue of Tawheed, which is the objective of our religion, happens to also be a way of finding fulfillment, by finding our way back away from separation, by dissolving the illusions, by exploring new territory within ourselves. And necessarily of those sacred senses, because Rumi talks about senses in terms of 5 external senses that are copper and 5 internal senses that are gold. Now, incidentally, he doesn't mean external senses like outside. He means actual types of perception. So one of the external perceptions for him would be, for example, the capacity for the human to see with this eye of the body. That seeing for him is an external, a copper perception. And the golden perception for Rumi is promised in the Hadith, where God says to the person who has become purified and is following the path of love, says that I will become her, or usually translated his, hearing and seeing and so forth. And this is the only way one could get to the second domain called the Ainul Yaqin. Earlier we were talking about the Ilmul Yaqin, and everything I've just said would be the Ilmul Yaqin. In other words, is the explanation. The Ainul Yaqin is you go try it out. And like a lot of people say, well, I can do that. And my answer is, I hope so. I know that I couldn't do any of it till I was 40, and then I started to do a little bit of it. So you see, it takes time. It just takes dedication. And one has to take personal responsibility, as they say, and make it their object to explore beyond the limitations that they've already known. And this might mean setting time aside in a way that is unconventional in this culture. On the other hand, the Sufi path is a path of integration, so one is not expected to generally abandon the world anymore in Sufism. But this poem in the English, I've tried to bring it to you as closely as I can to what it means. It is very close to the original, but I've used English words that are more true to what that means. I would have preferred using universal mind. But this notion of the Father, again, it evokes the sense of the sky and the spirit. Then as it impacts the world below it, which is the Nafsikul, which would be psyche in the Neoplatonic system. Well, he discusses the other world and the relationship because he says I who remain at peace with the sublime Father. Remember, earlier in the poem, he was saying that a lot of people have trouble with this idea. Rumi claims that he is at peace with the sublime Father, and what we know from everything he's written is that he has traveled with the sublime Father. He has tonight would be impossible, but if you look at translations in general on the website, you see I've translated many poems that indicate his trying to ask the reader to join him as much as they can to try to feel and sense the level that he has explored. On the other hand, most people then and now would deny the existence of such a domain. You could only, as he says at the end of the poem, he says, of thousands of secrets I will tell none, since every ear is stuffed with doubt. Why bother? If the people are not interested, I won't tell any of the thousands. I will not tell even one of the thousands of secrets to the ears that are stuffed with doubt, you see. But because he has traveled with the Father, meaning into the domain of Lahut, is really what he's saying here. Ay Khuda jan ra tu bin ma'an maqam kan daru behaf miru yad kalam. That's one of the poems I've repeat all the time to you, that he's starting out. He has a ladder. He's saying that, oh God, please show to the soul this station where the divine word is sprouting with no letters. You see? And the pious soul, meaning the purified soul, is using its head to run into the vast domains of space. Well, this is, you could see why people would be like, scoffing at this, right? So this is a perfect example of that kind of poem. And from that poem, he comes all the way down to where he says that this world is tighter than a prison. You see, it is so tight, it is like a prison. You see, and then he explains that the tightness of this world is called by multiplicity. But since you brought this up, but don't forget, he's saying, I perceive a world full of heavenly grace, a constant gushing of spring waters. Their waters' murmur invades my ears. My mind and awareness become ecstatic. Now, the thing about Ibn Arabi and Rumi, of the things they claim which seem outrageous or outlandish, one of them is they are already living in the Akhirah. Because you're saying to me, what about the other world? They are saying, no, that's the whole point. We have dissolved the illusion, and we now laugh, he says, we laugh at death. You will see in Masnavi, and Rumi and Ibn Arabi will say that the person who attains this level is in fact restored to timelessness, and the condition of the Akhirat is returning to one's origins. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Right? So they say we are experiencing mutu qabl an tamutu in this lifetime, die before you die. So for them, they are already talking about the afterlife, you see? And it's hard for the person to, my own view as a modern Westerner, what I observe is it's valuable to detach from the senses and the body and to experience the vastness of awareness without my individual self. It's valuable because then, frankly, it doesn't matter so much to me. Meaning, if I die and I have no awareness, for example, say like a modern skeptic, it doesn't matter. I already know there's this vast awareness. It's not a dead universe. On the other hand, if I have a place in that world, that world doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is the intimacy with God. You see? And this morning I quoted which Quranic verse about the afterlife? Because here it's like he's saying, because I can't pronounce these Arabic words very easily, but he's doing the similar sound of nadra and nazira. You see? So nadra means a shining, joyful, beaming, luminous. Their faces, and they are looking towards their Lord. So nazira. Nazarat. So this is the afterlife of those of the highest level. They're not different from what the Sufis say they are experiencing, because they cannot explain the paradox of the vastness they feel. They cannot explain the impossibility that clay could be the ornament of spirit. See? So they are automatically talking about the afterlife, right?